that I would move to Sydney and do whatever I could to help shape Australia's future by becoming a member of the Federal Parliament. But on the 24th of April 1994, as is often the case on that day, I was on a plane from Melbourne to Sydney, and I was reading an extensive piece about Anzac Day. And buried in the middle of the story was a quote from a then 99-year-old Gallipoli veteran who said, and I quote, "I am glad that I will be dead soon, because I don't want to be alive when Australia becomes a republic and they change the flag." And consistent with having an open mind, I was thinking about that. I'd heard people express all kinds of views about those two issues, but I'd never heard somebody say, "I'm glad I'll be dead soon," in relation to it. And so too it was on my mind when 3 weeks later there was a program which the ABC used to run on a Saturday morning called Attitudes, which was an avant-garde approach to contemporary issues for young people. And 10 young people, 16, 17, were all asked if they think Australia should become a republic. And every one of them said yes, with considerable enthusiasm. They were then asked to name the then Prime Minister of Australia, who of course was Mr. Keating. Only 8 of the 10 could manage that. They were then asked to name a minister in the then federal government. 4 could name one, and only 2 could name a second. Only 1 knew the difference between the Senate and the House of Representatives, and not 1 had any idea what the Australian Constitution is or what purpose it serves. And so too for me began a journey of realising that what is important to us is to understand what we have been given, the sacrifices of those who made it and gave us what we have, which so often we take for granted. I often say to young people to think, what is the first line of our national anthem, which we sang here earlier today? "Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are young and free." And from my point of view, almost all of the argument put by the Republicans and those who push for a republic is based on a series of fallacies and distortions. When Sir Henry Parkes delivered the Tenterfield Oration in 1889 to call for a People's Convention that would consider the development of a federal government for Australia, he could not have envisaged a century that would see everything from 2 world wars, the rise and fall of communism, the motor car, penicillin, pandemics, the computer chip, and many, many other things. But he and our forebears were able to look back on centuries, if not millennia, of civilization and of good governance. And perhaps unsurprising for the day, they chose a constitutional monarchy. But here we are more than a century later, free of political instability, free of insurrection, free of judicial and political corruption, and free of many of the things which are endemic in many other countries in other parts of the world. Those who push for a republic, who focus as they do on symbols, who focus as they do from time to time on the soap opera antics of some of the young royals, are involved in a deliberate case of distracting us from what are the real issues. We have a system where we have power, which is in the hands, if you like, of our elected officials and our politicians. And we have another where there is status and glory. And you might say, in one sense, that the Crown has the status, and our Governor-General has, to some extent, that status, if not, I wouldn't use the term glory necessarily in Australia, but the power, and certainly no glory, is in the hands of our elected politicians and our Prime Minister in particular. To politicise the powers of the Governor-General by handing them to a President, whether by a two-thirds majority of the Parliament, or indeed by the people of Australia, will fundamentally shift the balance of power and moral authority which has existed in this country since its federation. The Prime Minister of the day, whether Labor or Liberal, is under constant scrutiny from his own colleagues, from Senates, which can be difficult from time to time, from a media which applies immense scrutiny. If we have a person who is elected in any form, we will then have someone who will be seen to have more moral authority, with the powers vested in the Governor-General, who would be determined, given human nature being what it is, to act in certain circumstances and speak out as being a person seen to be above the Prime Minister of the day. The power that the Queen has, the power that the Governor-General has, is not in the power that is exercised, but in the power that is denied others. And those who seek to advance their own power, and I consider Mr. Keating to have been one of these, they seek to tear down the power that they are being denied by that which is held in our Governor-General. And that is the principal reason why I certainly do not support any move away from Australia's constitutional arrangements, and will spend the remainder of my life arguing that we remain as we are, and it is in our best interest to do so. In Christmas 1997, one of my constituents, people cease to be human beings in my job, they become constituents, but one of them sent me a book entitled Revelation by a German philosopher and physicist called Bernhard Filbert. It's a very heavy theological read about change, how you affect and manage change individually and across organisations and nations. And at one point he said, progress leads to chaos if not anchored in tradition. Tradition becomes rigid if it does not prepare the way for progress. But a perverted traditionalism and a misguided progressivism propel each other toward a deadly excess, hardly leaving any ground between. And that is the challenge for those who profess to lead. How do we take the values and institutions of this nation, who made us who we are, who gave us what we have, and use them as the foundation for our future in this century and beyond, at the same time as recognising that some change is not only inevitable but it is necessary. We have progressivists who want change at one hand, who neither understand nor respect what we have, and then at times we have traditionalists who don't want to see any change at all in anything. And the challenge always is to balance the two.